Many of you are either going back to work or already have, and there are likely to be conversations about race, injustice, protest, current events. How is that accomplished with coworkers? How do you find a starting point? How do you listen? How do you get your point across? Our guest is Cheri Perry, a business strategist and leadership expert who works with companies all over the country. Good morning, Cheri.
Morning, Cheri.
Hey, good morning, Art and Jennifer. Thanks for having me on.
I want to share an email that I got at the TV station where I work. A woman texted me and asked, "What can I do? How do I make a difference as a white woman?" And then a few days later, I got a second text from her, and she said, "My sister just chastised me and told me that it's not Art Holiday's job or any other black person's job to tell you what to do." And my response to her was, you know what, if your heart's in the right place, I'm good with it. And I'm kind of in a unique situation because people ask reporters and news anchors all the time about information. So I'm used to that. But for the purposes of this conversation, how do you begin the conversation in the workplace?
Great question. And I love what you said. You know, you knew where her heart was, and I think that's a really great place to start. I think in the workplace, you know, these are difficult conversations to have no matter which side of the equation you find yourself on. And the interesting thing here is that, you know, is there a right way to do it? I don't know. But I do know this. When we lead with love and we lead with an understanding that and an expectation that the people around us want to treat everybody with respect, that they want to be in a really good, strong work environment, and that we're all just making steps forward to make sure that's the reality, I think it's a very powerful place to start. Is it going to go perfect every time? No, because there's humans involved in it. There's going to be some kind of mess up along the line, but as long as we keep each other's heart in the conversation, in the perspective, I think it makes all the difference.
You know, Cheri, I know it's basic, but I think a lot of us forget to begin our conversations with I statements. I don't understand this. I would like to know more about this.
Right. Instead of how do you feel? I mean, there's a little bit of separation, and I applaud the woman who sent you the email. But if you have to send an email that says as a white woman or as a black man or as a whatever, put any descriptor that you want in front of it. It reminds me of a interview I saw with a Hollywood actor where he was asked, how do we stop the racism? And he goes, well, first thing, I'm going to stop looking at you and calling you a white man. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing and quit looking at me as a black man. We're men. And so it's a tough conversation, but I believe that when you've got good, strong leadership in the workplace and you're not afraid to touch on the tough topics, you can work through anything.
Well, let's talk about leadership because obviously leaders play a tremendous role in whether it's government, whether it's business, what have you. What's the responsibility of leadership to create a culture of being able to talk about difficult topics and respecting differing opinions?
Well, it's a massive responsibility as a leader. And I would say first and foremost, especially in this whole just supreme time of unrest, our leaders have an obligation not to pour gasoline on a fire. That's the first thing. You know, it's part of I think the Hippocratic Oath where it says, first thing, do no harm. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we have to think about as leaders is the word or the message that I'm sending out to my team fueling a fire with regard to these particular topics? If it is, man, I got to be better at picking my words.
Well, we definitely have seen some leadership on a national level that does fuel the fire instead of de-escalate.
Well, it's hard. It's a passionate topic, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever we're passionately involved in something, sometimes our mouths override our thought process, and we, send something out into the universe, and we've seen some pretty high profile people in the last several days make comments, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, what did I just say? And so the other part of that conversation, Jennifer, and I think this is just as important, is, man, we just can't be super, super thin-skinned.
Right.
We have to act as if we are not victims. And when we act as if we're not victims, we receive information from people. In a way, I just finished an article for a publication, and they said, what happens if you do encounter some kind of issue in the workplace? My first comment, and it's always the same, is you need to address it with the person who said something or acted to you in a certain way.
Yeah, address it directly, which is hard for a lot of people to do.
Well, it is hard, but just like Art said at the top of our conversation, hard conversations require hard action. And we have got to wrap ourselves around the personal responsibility of the fact that, sometimes we take things a little too personally. And I'm not minimizing the fact that there are some comments out there that just should never be said, but I am saying that we just have to be able to accept the differences in our workplaces without being so absolutely sensitive. And if something does rub you the wrong way, you can't walk away from it. You've got to address it.
I know we have a lot of Starbucks fans who are listening. And this is a well-known situation a couple of years ago when Starbucks faced nationwide backlash after video was released of two black men being arrested in a Philadelphia Starbucks while waiting for their friend for a business meeting. Starbucks closed 8,000 stores across the country in order to conduct racial bias education training. Well, now 2 years after that, I'm wondering, does anybody know, did that work? Did that make a difference?
Well, it made a fiscal difference immediately. It cost them over $12 million to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is I do think that it opened up the conversation. But I think the better long-term question for Starbucks would be, what did I do to make sure that I am having an environment or an atmosphere of inclusion at all of my stores, not just so every time there's an issue I take an action, but how do I prevent the issue? And one of the things that they did that I thought was, it's an action that they took to say, listen, let's not have this thing happen before, but they now let people come into their stores even if they're not buying something and sit down and wait. I think they felt that action might have prevented what happened there.
So what has to happen in terms of, if we're talking about the workplace, what needs to happen if there hasn't been diversity training, inclusion training, bias training? And I guess this goes back to the leaders of the organizations, right?
It does. The first thing that has to happen is just the A-word, awareness. They have to be aware of what their work culture is really like. If they've crafted a workplace environment where people don't say anything or let's not talk about it, they got to clean that out. And that is not an easy task. If people have waited for a race conversation or a cultural difference conversation to instill good core values in their company, man, they waited too long. So when I'm talking to new business owners, I'm like, man, start off with a strong mission. Start off with a set of core values that just wouldn't permit these kinds of things to creep into your organization. And if you're a company that's allowed that to happen, I'd like to whisper into the ears of our employees and say, guys, guess what? If we don't allow people to be treated a certain way, and we just say, you know what, we need to fix these things, or else, unfortunately, my set of core values wouldn't allow me to work for you, pretty soon businesses won't have employees that would work in a situation where other people were treated poorly. It's personal responsibility, and I really feel like that's where it has to start.
We'll end our conversation there, Cheri. Cheri Perry, thank you for your time this morning. We enjoyed the conversation. Maybe we can check in with you down the line.
We'd love to. Thanks, you guys. Have a
Take
great
care,
day.
Cheri.